Open up your Bibles to 2 Samuel chapter 2. 2 Samuel chapter 2. We're going to jump right into the text here. We're going to be introduced to some new names, and there's somebody in this chapter that we're going to get a little bit more of an acquaintance with that is going to play a major part throughout the rest of the book of 2 Samuel, and that is a man by the name of Joab. All right, let's look at the first. This lesson is titled "Rising Up to Play," as we're about to see what's going to happen. Look at the first several verses here through verse 7. It says, "And it came to pass after this that David inquired of Jehovah, saying, Shall I go up into any of the cities of Judah? And Jehovah said unto him, Go up. And David said, Whither shall I go up? And he said unto Hebron." Now, if just stopping right there at verse 1, after this, and it came to pass after this, that this is the thought process of that they had just executed this man for having claimed to have killed Saul, and this is what's happening right after. Now, David asks of God, and sometimes people ask, how did he do this? And it's likely, as we've seen in the past in 1 Samuel, that he is using Abiathar, the priest, and is inquiring of God through the ephod. And so, all that being the case, more than likely, he is probably communicating to God this way. And so, verse 2. "So David went up thither, and his two wives also, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And his men that were with him did David bring up, every man with his household, and they dwelt in the cities of Hebron. And the men of Judah came, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah. And they told David, saying, The men of Jabesh Gilead were they that buried Saul. And David sent messengers unto the men of Jabesh Gilead, and said unto them, Blessed be ye of Jehovah, that ye have showed this kindness unto your Lord, even unto Saul, and have buried him. And now Jehovah show loving kindness and truth unto you, and I also will requite you this kindness, because ye have done this thing. Now, therefore let your hands be strong, and be valiant, for Saul your Lord is dead, and also the house of Judah have anointed me king over them." So, I want to just take a moment and point out something that the commentators like to mention here. They like to say that, David is being political, and David has gone to the men of Jabesh Gilead, and he is basically showing his allegiance to Saul and talking about Saul in a good way in order to curry some favor with these men. I just don't see that in David's actions. David has not shown to be this kind of a person, but let me ask you a question. Did he kill the man that supposedly killed Saul for political, favors? No. Why did he do that? He said, how dare you? Why did you think that you should put your hand against the Lord's anointed? Now, he didn't do that for any sort of political power. He just did it because that was the right thing to do. Now, he's looking at these men and saying, look at what you've done. You've done a great thing. And so he is lifting them up for this. All right, next passage here, verses 8 through 11. It says, Now Abner, the son of Ner, captain of Saul's host, had taken Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, and brought him over to Mahanaim, and he made him king over Gilead, and over the Asherites, and over the Jezreel, and over Ephraim, and over Benjamin, and over all Israel. And Ishbosheth, Saul's son, was 40 years old when he began to reign over Israel, and reigned 2 years, but the house of Judah followed David. And the time that David was king in Hebron over the house of Judah was 7 years and 6 months. So there's a big, just kind of a time frame that is discussed here, and you're gonna see that sometimes this happens, and it's kind of a jump forward in time. Sometimes this happens, and what you're seeing is just basically an overview of what's about to happen. This is kind of jumping forward in time. And so Abner he's the captain of Saul's army. He has taken Ishbosheth, Saul's son, and he has made him king over Israel. Now, That's kind of an interesting concept. I mean, this is exactly what they were kind of warned against in the beginning. that whenever they were asking for a king, they were going to get exactly what came with a king. Now, does that mean that Ishbosheth was ready to reign? No, it doesn't. It just means that that's exactly what happened. He was the son of Saul, and then he was put in a place of power. Now, much like what we see even today in some countries, you'll have these kings that they'll reign, and then when they die, their son reigns, and it really does not matter at what age that this happens, right? We're going to see this even throughout the reign of David and his descendants. You're going to have Solomon reigning at a very young age. And so he just takes over the throne after his father dies. Now, this is what's going on, and now you've kind of got some division going on, right? So you've got Judah going with David, and then Israel, the rest of Israel is under Ishbosheth. And so, there's a lot that could be going on here, but the number one thing is that, obviously, there's got to be some time here for things to kind of settle down, for David even to build an army, and that's going to take some time here. All right, moving on. Verse 12 and following here, rising up to play. And Abner, the son of Ner, and the servants of Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, went out from Mahanaim to Gibeon, and Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and the servants of David went out and met them by the pool of Gibeon. And they sat down, the one on the one side of the pool, and the other on the other side of the pool. So these are enemies, and they are going out. They're going to meet each other. You don't really get a whole lot of idea of what's going on here, but they're clearly keeping their distance. You've got this pool that's separating them. Maybe they're going to have some talks, try to come up with some kind of an arrangement, if you will. And this is kind of the thought process that is likely to have occurred. We don't know exactly, but it's likely that they were saying, hey, you know what? Let's just settle this right here and right now. And it used to be that, and this has happened for a long time, where you would take your champions. Remember a whole David and Goliath scenario? That was very common. You would take one man from each side. You'd have a champion. They'd go and they'd fight each other. And we discussed this back then when discussing 1 Samuel chapter 17. And they'd go and they'd fight each other. And the thought process was that the person that would win, that their side automatically won, and you saved lives that way. And that was just the major thought process. That the thought here is likely to have been something similar. Hey, you know what? We need to come to an agreement, but let's do this by combat, if you will. Now, it says, verse 14, and Abner said to Joab, let the young men, I pray thee, rise up and play before us. And Joab said, let them arise. Now, when we think about rising up to play, this phrase has been used a few times in the Scripture, and it has never been used in a good way. If you think back to the debacle there at Mount Sinai, and you've got Moses coming down off the mountain, and it says that the people rose up to play. And it is not a good scenario what they were doing. They were not fighting, but they were committing immorality together. Now, what is going on here is not the same thing. They're rising up to play, but more like gladiators rise up to play. You've got these men, and they say, you know what? Let's instead of having a boxing match here, let's just put our soldiers out and let's see who wins. And so, verse 15, then they arose and went over by number, 12 for Benjamin, and for Ishbosheth, son of Saul, and 12 of the servants of David. And they caught everyone his fellow by the head, and thrust his sword in his fellow's side, so they fell down together. Wherefore that place was called Helkath Hazarim, which is in Gibeon. And the battle was very sore that day, and Abner was beaten, and the men of Israel before the servants of David. Now, when you're looking at this, you might have a lot of questions, but it looks like what has happened is that the men of David come up against Benjamin. These are Saul's household members, and they go up, and and instead of there being this long fight, the phrase is given here that they took everyone by the head, and then they thrust their swords through their side, and then they all fell down together. So it looks like David's men just come in and just immediately just take care of business. There have been some to say that maybe it is that there's a back and forth, but that is not according to what the numbers look like at the end of this thing when we look at the end of this chapter. All right, verse 18 and following. This is the death of Ahasuerus. And the three sons of Zeruiah were there, Joab and Abishai and Ahasuerus. It's actually Asahel, and was light of foot as a wild roe. So he's kind of like, he's like a deer. He's able to go out and he's able to run real fast. And Asahel pursued after Abner, and in going he turned not to the right hand nor to the left from following Abner. So you're going to see this phrase several times throughout 2 Samuel. Doesn't turn to the right hand or to the left. Does not get distracted. He does not veer off, but he is closing in on Abner. So Asahel is not turning from the right nor to the left after following Abner. Verse 20, then Abner looked behind him and said, is it thou, Asahel? And he answered, it is I. And Abner said to him, turn thee aside to the right hand or to thy left, and lay thee hold on one of the young men, and take thee his armor. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. So do you see what Abner's doing? Abner's running away from him. And he says, is that you? Is that you, Asahel? And he says, it's me. I'm right behind you. And he says, well, you know what? Quit running after me. Go after one of these other guys. Go ahead, kill him, take his armor. Don't kill me right now. Don't do that. And Abner, see here. Howbeit, verse 23. Actually, sorry, let me back up. Then Abner looked behind him. Lost my place for a second. 21. Abner said, turn aside, the right hand to the left, and lay hold on thee one of the young men, and take thee his armor. But Asahel would not turn aside from following him. And Abner said again to Asahel, turn thee aside from following me. Wherefore should I smite thee to the ground? How then should I hold up my face to Joab thy brother? So he's saying, look, Joab is evidently high-ranking in the army, of David, and he's in charge of the army. Abner's in charge of his army, and he says, well, if I'm going to kill you, how am I going to go and face off against your brother? I don't want that. I don't want to kill you for your brother's sake right now. And, of course, as we're going to realize, Joab is, I don't know what he looked like, but he must have been pretty intimidating because, well, he can get the job done, and he gets the job done over and over and over again. And so he says, how am I going to be able to face your brother? Verse 23, howbeit he refused to turn aside, wherefore Abner with the hinder end of the spear smote him in the body, so that the spear came out behind him, and he fell down there and died in the same place. And it came to pass that as many as came to the place where Asahel fell down and died stood still. So if you will remember when we talked about Saul and David going into his camp and trying to, they took his spear, remember that? And it was stuck in the ground. There was a counterbalance that was on the end of a spear to be able to help weight it properly so you could thrust it properly. And also, that end was very easily able to be stuck into the ground. And so they would, oftentimes, if you're resting, you could just take it and stab it into the ground, and it would stand upright. And so you didn't have to worry about ruining your blade and sticking your blade into the ground or tripping over it or someone else tripping over it. You just stick it vertical. Well, this counterbalance is not meant to be used as a weapon. It's just really meant to be stuck into the ground. And it's not exceptionally sharp like the end is. And so it is what is used, Abner uses it to kill Asahel. And now, this is kind of the grotesque aspect of this. Everybody that comes and they sees him on the ground, it evidently is so grotesque that they stop and they stand still. Now, if you just imagine what soldiers have seen in battle, it's going to take a lot, I think, to make a man stand still and go, wow, right? I mean, listen, I've had some buddies in the military, and, I've had some guys that I used to talk to a lot that were Marines, and, I would have to cut them off and go, I think that's enough talk for tonight. That's enough, I'd sit there and they would tell me all these stories and all these gruesome things that happened, and they could just laugh about it. And I've not seen any of this stuff, and I've got a strong stomach, and I'm going, I don't think I want to think about that. That's okay. Let's not. They would describe stuff that isn't seen in movies. I was like, man, this is really grotesque. But for someone that is used to being around people, I mean, listen, this is not in the day where you shoot somebody from afar. This is when you actually hack at them with a sword, okay? You're stabbing them and you're hacking at them with a sword. That's gruesome. And yet, this is, however grotesque this must have been, all the men, they are just shocked when they see it. And they just stand still and they look at it. Now, this does not end the story here. Look at verses 24 through 29. This is the pursuit of Abner. But Joab and Abishai pursued after Abner, and the sun went down when they were come to the hill of Ammah, that lieth before Giah by the way of the wilderness of Gibeon. And the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together after Abner and became one band and stood on the top of a hill. Then Abner called to Joab and said, Shall the sword devour forever? Knowest thou not that it will be bitterness in the latter end? How long shall it be then, ere thou bid the people return from following their brethren? And Joab said, As God liveth, if thou hadst not spoken, surely in the morning the people had gone away, nor followed every one his brother. And so, did you see what Joab does there? I think this is true. I don't think he's really speaking out of turn. But he said, don't you remember who started this? Don't you remember whose idea it was to let the young men rise up and play? It was your idea. It was your idea. And now, what do we see? This is the end result of you just running your mouth. And so, this is something that he didn't want to happen, but this is what's happening. So Joab blew the trumpet, all the people stood still, and pursued after Israel no more, neither fought they any more. And Abner and his men went all the night through the Arabah, and they passed over the Jordan and went through the Bithron and came to Mahanaim. All right, moving on. Verses 30 through 32. And Joab returned from following Abner, and when he gathered all the people together, there lacked of David's servants 19 men and a Hazael. But the servants of David had smitten of Benjamin, of Abner's men, so that 360 men died. And they took up Asahel and buried him in the sepulchre of his father, which was in Bethlehem. And Joab and his men went all night, and the day brake upon them at Hebron. All right, so this is the aftermath of the battle. Now you look at this. They are, supposed to be an inferior force. They are much smaller in number than the children of Israel. They may be closer in number now after having the battles before, when Saul's men all died and that day when he died. But there are still some left. But look at the numbers here for David. David's servants, there was 19 men and a Hazael. So there's two, like 20 here that are missing from David's men. Now, when you look at what has happened, you look at the others, 360 men die. Many, many more than what David has lost. And so they bury Asahel, and they move on, and they go back to Hebron. Okay, so lessons learned. Let's look at lesson learned here. Now, I think mostly about how Abner, when he was, right here in the middle of this chapter, Abner says, you know what, let's let the young men rise up and play. Now, he likely thought, this is easy. We're going to win this one really quickly. We're going to show these men what's what. Maybe he thought, hey, we're going to have a real quick battle here. We're going to kill all these guys. And yet, that's not what happens at all. Now, I think that, Abner clearly thought that there'd be a different outcome, and that's why he spoke up. Joab knew better, because what you're going to find with David's men is that they are very good at what they do. They are very good. When it's described about their men later on in these chapters, you're going to find that they're able to shoot bows and throw rocks with both hands. It doesn't matter. They're able to. They're ambidextrous when fighting, and so that's David's men. And yet nobody else is described that way. I don't know if you've ever tried throwing with your non-dominant hand. I'll tell you what. If you know how to throw a ball. And for guys, if you've ever tried this, if you can throw a baseball, you can throw a football. You can, with your dominant hand. So like most people, right-handed, man, you can throw that ball, and you can look good throwing that ball, right? You can do that. Now then, take the ball in your opposite hand and try throwing it. Now you look like a doofus. Okay, that's what most people look like. I can tell you, I remember watching a video and it was a guy, and he was doing some kind of workout routine, and he was showing how to throw a ball, and he was doing it with his right hand, and then he goes, all right, now switch to your other arm, and he can't do the right throwing motion. He goes, forgive me, I know I look like an idiot here, and it's true. You don't know how to do it, then you really don't look good doing it. You can't do it. Most people can't do it, but David's men are highly trained. They know what they're doing, and so this was a slam dunk for David and his men. But for Abner and his men, this is really, it's far from over. But they get the picture real quick that they were really outmatched all the way. But having all that in consideration, think about Abner, and you got to understand this, that the consequences of your actions may go further than you desire. I think that this happens in so many ways. But if you go back to the book of Genesis and you look at Jacob and Esau, you see this very thing happening. What does Esau do? Oh, I'm starving. Give me some of this food, and give me your birthright. Give me your birthright, and you can have it. And I said, well, what do I need it for? I'm about to die. Go ahead, have my birthright. It doesn't matter to me. And so that starts, that little thing right there starts hundreds of years of fighting. I mean, do you realize that? That one act right there starts hundreds of years of fighting. Esau's people become the Edomites. Edomites hate the Israelites. And they oftentimes stand there. Matter of fact, they stood in the way when they were trying to escape from their captors. They blocked them off so that they had to be, they went into captivity because of it. You go back to, the whole entire book of Obadiah is written because of this feud. You go back to the time of Moses. During Moses' time, they are having problems with the Edomites. They try to pass through the land, and they said, "No, you're not going to be able to come on the land." And said, "You know what? Even if one of our cattle drinks and some water, we'll pay for it. We're not going to take anything from you. You just want to pass through your land." They say, "No, you are not coming. You step foot on our land, we're going to kill you." That's the Edomites. That came from one small action, right? Now you think about this. Abner has thought, you know what? Probably thought, this is easy. Just real easy decision. And yet this one thing is going to perpetuate other problems, eventually leading to his death. Now, I could come up with other things to say here, but I think that we need to think about this spiritually speaking. You know, what is it that we are doing today that may have consequences? What actions are we doing today that have consequences for the future? And you can think about that both positive and negative. You know, in a negative way, you know, I look around. I was actually thinking about this earlier. You know, I'm seeing several people who are not here tonight that, you know, could be here more than likely. Where are they? You know, a little action today, missing one time here, missing one time there. You know, oh, you know what? Listen, I know we all get sick. I know we all get tired. I know sometimes things come up. I get that. But if we can at all help it, then you know what we do? You know what? We're going to put God first, right? If it is within our power, we put God first. You know, I realize that some things might be outside of your power. They might just be out of your reach that you can't do anything about. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the things that you can control. And so put God first. When you don't put God first, guess what happens? Oh, it starts a chain reaction. You know, I can name several families that this has happened with, but, you know, when we don't put God first and we're, you know, thinking about these little things and putting importance on little things more than anything, you know, more than God, you know, we're going to have some problems. I've seen families that they put sports before God. And guess what? You know what happens to most of those kids? I don't even know what the statistic is, but it's got to be over 90%, because I see so many of those kids falling away. You put sports first, oh man, they fall away. You know what about this? Putting school first. School's important, right? You gotta learn stuff. You know, you gotta be a productive citizen. You gotta be able to have a job and all that stuff. School's important. You gotta have education. I get that. But is it more important than God? Okay, let me ask you a question to help solidify this one. You know, if you have the choice of being able to make a lot of money because you've had a good education versus going to heaven, which one should you choose? You know, it would be better to live an impoverished life and then go to heaven than to live a life of plenty and not go to heaven. You know, that's pretty easy, right? You know, we've talked about these very things with entertainment choices, and you know, I heard my father-in-law say it so many times, and I just did not understand, you know, what he was saying exactly. And then one day it clicked, and I was like, okay, now I get it. You know, I thought, you know, maybe it wasn't the best argument to use because people go, oh, you know what, I'll lose out on a little fun here, and then he'll say, but you know what, you get to go to heaven. And I'm like, well, okay, yeah, but here's the thing. Is that when you put heaven as the most important thing in your life, it really doesn't matter what else is there. You know, listen, you might love some form of entertainment that's good and wholesome and clean. But when heaven is your first priority, that thing does not take precedence over spiritual things. It doesn't matter what it is. Doesn't matter if it's education. Doesn't matter if it's sports. Doesn't matter if it's your friends or your family. It does not matter what it is. Nothing should take precedence over God. And so we put him first, knowing that the consequences of our actions, you know, may go further than we realize. Maybe it's further than we desire. But on a positive note, what if it is better than we could ever expect? What if you put God first all the time, and then people see that, you bring other people to the Lord, And then what happens? They see your good example. They bring other people to the Lord. And then what happens? Well, they're living the same kind of life you were. And they're being that example for somebody else. And now they're bringing people to the Lord. And now they're bringing people to the Lord. And now they're bringing people to the Lord. And so on, so on, and so on for generations and generations, because you decided to be faithful and make an impact. But if you decide right now that, you know what, I don't really care, I'm not going to be faithful, well, then you won't make that impact. You'll make a negative impact. And so here is the question. What kind of consequences are there going to be for your actions? Are you going to have some positive consequences to your actions? Or are you going to have some negative ones? And so, brethren, as we end out our thoughts tonight, if you have not yet become a Christian, if someone here has not yet become a Christian, you have the opportunity to do that. We'd love to study with you, hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized. And then for those that have already done that, you need to live faithfully. If you are in need of this invitation, it is yours. Please come as we stand and as we sing.